So today, when I was thinking about doing kind of an outline for an episode on love languages, I was doing a bit of research and I found a study. 41% of the relationships in the study accredit their relationship not working out, coming down to misunderstanding each other's love languages. And I found that so interesting because 41% is fucking crazy. And it feels like if there's something that's going to impact whether your relationships are successful or not, that much, it's quite important to understand it, in my opinion, if you want a successful relationship. But seeing as it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, it's a love themed episode. Just worked out like that, but I'm gonna pretend it was planned. One thing that I find so interesting about love languages and kind of just love in general is you would think it would be a lot simpler than it is. Do you know what I mean? For example, you would think any behavior or actions that you do that come from a place of loving someone would be received as love to the other person, you know? If you're doing something because you love someone and in your brain you're thinking, I'm doing this because I love them, you would think that would translate as love to the other person. But the fact that it's not that simple, I find quite interesting. That, like, it really, to me, highlights how different everyone is. Like, love isn't one language in that way. Hence, there's 5, or I think there might be 7 now. I think they've updated the theory. So your love language is how you receive love. It's not how you give love. I feel like that is the main confusing thing. Your love language, it's the language, behaviors, actions that you see as love. Like, it's not necessarily, I feel like some people think, what's your love language? Oh, it's like, I love to give people gifts. That's how I show love. That's how you show love. But your love language is what you need to feel loved. Does that make sense? They're kind of really similar concepts, but that is the definition of a love language. It's like the language you interpret love as. Everyone's idea of what love is and looks like and feels like is completely different due to a ridiculous amount of factors. Through my own knowledge of love languages and the research that I did for this episode, it's kind of a debate where your love language comes from, because obviously there are so many factors, and it's like, it's not like you can do some sort of experiment where someone has a certain childhood and someone has a different childhood, and because they also come across a million different things, like, you just can't really measure it. But the two main kind of theories, I suppose, are that it comes from what you lacked in your childhood, like what your parents never did or didn't do very often. Or the other theory is that it's what you got the most in your childhood, which seems a little bit backwards because it's like they're fucking opposites. Like, surely they can't be both of them, but they can, and I kind of see why. For example, if you were in a childhood where your parents never said anything nice to you, like, they didn't praise you, they didn't big you up, they didn't support you, it makes sense that then in a romantic relationship as an adult, it would feel really kind of luxurious to be with someone who's really supportive, like vocally, you know, words of affirmation, which is one of the love languages, hence why I'm referencing it. You know, that would feel like, oh my fucking god, they must love me because this is so nice. Like, I'm not used to this. Do you know what I mean? Like, you lacked it and now you're getting it. It feels so special. You know, there's something kind of refreshing about it. But on the flip side, what you're familiar with and what your environment felt like at home, you know, it kind of does form what you think love is, you know, how your parents were with each other, if that's what you saw, or how your parents were with you, because it's not just romantic love, it's kind of everything. You know, maybe your mum hugged you a lot, maybe there was a lot of physical affection in your house. Your parents might have been really, like, physically affectionate with each other, and then, you know, I can see how that would feel familiar to you, and that would be your kind of picture of what love is. And then if you dated someone who wasn't very, like, I don't really want to hold your hand out, you'd be like, why don't you love me? Do you know what I mean? So I can see how they both make sense. And what I'm concluding is that no one fucking knows where it comes from, and it could be anything because they are so contradictory. But, you know, you're never going to work it out, because Another thing is, it's malleable. Generally, anything that's learned, and your love language is learned, you're not born with a love language. It changes, you know. The same with your attachment style, which I don't want to talk too much about because, like I said, I'm going to do a full episode on it. But anything that's learned, you're going to learn more information. So your answers are going to change. The more you learn about yourself, the more relationships that you're in, the more that you grow up, you know, the more you experience, and also the more self-aware you become. Because you also might be with someone whose love language is something you've never really cared about or thought about, but being with them, you might think, actually, this is really fucking nice. Do you know what I mean? It's not fixed in the way that, you know, you might think it would be. But because, like I said, love isn't necessarily as straightforward as everyone speaks the same love language. You know, unfortunately, it's not that fucking simple. But at the same time, I think it makes things more interesting in a way that everyone kind of wants and sees things slightly differently. I think life would be boring if we all had the same love language. But because we all see it differently, receive it differently, take everything differently, you do have to be quite intentional. You can't necessarily just, like I said, do something from a place of love and think that's going to be taken exactly how I wanted it to be, and they're going to feel exactly what I want it, because that's the same as anything in life. Like, things generally aren't that straightforward, and, you know, you have to be quite intentional with it all. So the 5 love languages are quality time. I'm also gonna just say a couple ways that this would be put into practice so it's a bit more tangible, although they are fairly on the nose. Okay, someone whose primary love language, because by the way, you have a primary one, but then you also have all of them. Like, I'm not saying you only have one. You know, just because you might love gifts, spoiler alert, that's a different one, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't also appreciate, like, we'd all appreciate all of these, but it's kind of the key and the point, I guess, is to work out what your primary love language is, because that one's the one that's gonna, like, make the most impact on you. So quality time. Someone whose primary love language is quality time will see love and kind of appreciate the most things like one-on-one time, you know, being really present when you're with them, not sitting on your phone, you know, making eye contact. Maybe, you know, a weekend getaway would be very important to someone who loves quality time. And, you know, if you follow this logic, if you're not putting much into this and that's their primary love language, that's kind of what those 41% are saying, is that I didn't realize that's how they saw love, so I didn't really, you know, try that hard in that department. That's why it's kind of key to work out what yours and your partners are, or your friends, or your whoever that you love, so you kind of know where to channel your love and energy, and you know kind of what way to fucking direct it. I kind of see it as like they're giving you, if someone tells you what their love language is, it makes it a whole lot more straightforward, because it's kind of like they're giving you a map to how they want their partner to be with them, and you don't have to do all of the fucking like work. And I know that sounds lazy, it's just like them giving you like a map to, like, this is what I want this is how to love me. And how helpful is that information? Do you know what I mean? And I think if you are at that point, self-awareness wise, where you can, and it's fine if you're not, it doesn't matter, it's fine if you're not, but if you are at that point where you can kind of, you know, these things about yourself, you know what makes you feel loved, you know your attachment style. I need to stop talking about that or I'm gonna have nothing to fucking say in that episode. Then I think you and your partner, you're dodging a lot of the main potholes in relationships. You're skipping a lot of the probably most common issues that come up in relationships and fuck them up. It's like you're immediately starting on a good page where you know these things about each other that I feel like people often spend a long time not getting right. And I'm not saying that if you know your love language, you're never gonna like have fucking issues. You will. But I'm just saying this is a big one that if you can kind of work it out with yourself and with your partner and have them work it out for themselves as well, then you're kind of starting from a good place already. Okay, second love language. I am looking at my notes because I have a fuck ton of them for this episode. Physical touch. So the first one was quality time. Second one, physical touch. Again, kind of simple, but holding hands, kissing them, little things like maybe your girlfriend is cooking and you go up behind her and you hug her. That, you know, if your love language is physical touch, that's the shit you want. You know, this type of person will be very into cuddling, having their hair played with. Also, sex would apply, but then, like, again, this applies to everyone. Like, most people would say sex is important in their relationship. But I guess maybe, I'm fucking guessing, but I'm guessing maybe someone who their love language is physical touch would want their sex to be more, like, loving. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I wouldn't say physical touch is mine, so you'd have to ask someone whose it is, but I don't know how sex relates, but it will. Number 3, acts of service. This is me, okay? This is a whole lot of me, I think, acts of service. This is kind of someone whose love language is acts of service. I can speak from experience here because this is a big one for me. Is kind of making the person's life easier in some way, whether it's alleviating their workload for that day in some way, or it's doing them a favor that they didn't ask you to do. You know, maybe you get air in their tires for them because you're like, oh, I noticed you needed to do that. It's just taking something off the list. Do you know what I mean? That to me, I'm like, I am in love with you. Or, you know, maybe before work, they always make a coffee, get their lunch out the fridge, you know, fill their bag up for work or whatever, I don't know, and you do it for them. That, like, oh my god, I saw something on Instagram that I was like, that is me. And it was like this girl who's, her boyfriend had, like, she had quite like a strong evening routine, and he'd basically gone and done like 80% of it for her. Like, he'd filled up her water and put it next to her bed, he'd put her oil diffuser on, he'd turned on her favorite show, he'd like made her bed, like put her pillow spray on her pillow. I'd like that. To me, I was like, oh my god, I think I'd fall in love with someone if they did that to me. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know, just basically acts of service. It's not necessarily like, oh, I want you to do shit for me, but like it kind of is. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, it's like, again, these things, like, you don't have to do them all the time, but if like occasionally you like change my sheets, you know. But to me, I think that feels like love to me for a few different reasons. One of them being that is what my mum does for me and has always done for me. She will always kind of go out of her way to do things that I'm like, I didn't even ask you to do that. Like, whenever I go away on a trip, she will be like, I watered all of your plants, hoovered your room, and changed your sheets, and I'm like, oh my god, like, I didn't ask you to do any of that. And it's just the fact that she wants me to come home and not have to do it myself. Do you know what I mean? And that to me is like, oh my god, you've just made my life easier. I love you. Do you know what I mean? And I think also because I'm someone who's I'm quite busy, and I'm a little bit of like, I don't want to say a control freak, but like I'm very much the type of person to have a big to-do list and be quite busy and kind of just hacking away at it myself all day. Like, that's kind of just what I forget to be like, oh, could someone else, I don't know, walk the dog? I just am like, no, I have to do it all. So I also think it is kind of like with that where I'm like, oh my god, why did they just do that for me? Like, what the fuck? I forget that people can do that. So I think when people do, I don't know, it just makes sense to me that I'm like, your biggest kind of currency is your time, and you've chosen to spend your time on me having a nicer time. Like, if that's not love, what is to me? Do you know what I mean? So that's definitely a big one for me. Another one is gifts. This one people think is quite superficial. Like, they're like, gifts, of course, like, I fucking love stuff. Like, I feel like it isn't a superficial thing. None of these are superficial. It's what you see love as. This is more like thoughtful tokens, you know? Like, oh, I went to the shop and they had your favorite pizza in, so I bought it for you. Things like that. I feel like that's what you'd want. Like, it's not so much like, oh, I spent £100 on you. It's like, oh, I thought about you throughout my day. Again, I don't think this is one of mine. Obviously, I appreciate I would love if someone bought me something. But okay, the lighting just went really weird, so I moved my car slightly, and the lighting is still a bit weird, but we're just gonna have to ignore it because I can't do anything about that. But yeah, so gifts as a love language, not superficial, it doesn't have to be expensive, but maybe this person, you know, growing up, birthdays were a really big deal or something like that, or Christmas, where their family always went all out in making that a fun thing. I always think about Jay Shetty and his wife, and before they were married, he said that one of his main love languages was gifts, because like I said, his family always made a big thing about birthdays and things. And when he was dating, who is his now wife, Radhi, he really wanted an iPad. Like, he'd been talking about it for ages, that he really wanted this specific iPad, and she bought him like some Android tablet and was like, I got you what you wanted. And it really upset him, not because like, it's tricky this one because it does sound fucking superficial, like, oh, you didn't get me my fucking iPad, like it sounds like that, but it's not. I think it's more the fact of like that it made him feel like she didn't get what he'd been talking about, and like wasn't really paying attention to what he's interested in and what he actually wants. And it felt kind of like a thoughtless, you know, it kind of probably felt like you didn't fucking try that hard. And that is tricky because it's like she probably didn't mean to, but anyway, that's what it makes me think of. He has talked about that in interviews and things a lot of the time. He always uses that as a good example of why it's so important to understand your partner's love language. Okay, and the fifth, by the way, the lighting's changed again, ignore it. The fifth love language is words of affirmation, encouraging them, complimenting them, validating that they're doing a good job, that they're doing well, that you're proud of them, that maybe if they have a job interview, remembering to text them and say that you're gonna do a really fucking good job. Do you know what I mean? Like, words of affirmation, again, these sound like what they are, but this person finds it very important to hear from their partner rather than see it. Like, obviously everyone also wants actions, but you could action wise do everything, you know, for this person. If you're not telling them vocally that you love them and you're proud of them and that you're attracted to them and that they're smart and things like that, they're gonna think, why doesn't he like me? You have to make an extra effort to say these things to this person. And again, everyone wants that, and it's important to do that for your partner. Oh my god, this lighting is pissing me off. What's all this flickering? But I think, like I said, the reason that it's so important to understand what yours and your partner's love languages are, again, just to reinforce, you can use this with friends and family and all sorts. I'm just kind of focusing on relationships because I feel like that's where it's most prominent, and it's Valentine's Day, so kind of trying to stay on theme. I'm not. If you see it as a language, you know, hence the name, and you're speaking two different languages to each other, you're leaving a lot of space for miscommunication. And in general, you want to avoid that as much as possible, I feel like, with relationships. And I think one of the main things that this can end up creating is you kind of can end up hurting your partner, you know, is you can kind of leave your partner feeling a little bit just misunderstood. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that is the issue with this, is that not only, obviously, if you're missing the mark with love languages, they're not necessarily going to feel super loved. It's just also the whole, like, I feel like you don't get what I want. I think it's also that can harm relationships, is it kind of leaves you feeling a little bit like the person doesn't really see and understand you quite right. But what I find interesting is, like I said at the start, your love language is how you receive love, what you see love as. What I find interesting is that people often use their love language on other people. So that's kind of a good way to work out if you're like, I don't really know what my love language is. By the way, there's a quiz online, not just some random shit quiz. I think there is a quiz that's tied to the book, like an official quiz, you know. A good indicator for what your love language is how do you show the people that you love them? Because quite often we give out love and practice love in the ways that we want it, because obviously that's what we see love as. So as much as, like I said, your love language isn't necessarily the way you give it, it's more the way you receive it, it often does end up as the same thing. You know, for example, like I said, a lot of mine is acts of service. That is hugely how I show people that I love them. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with loving people in your love language, because at the end of the day, if you're doing something from love, like, you're not harming anything, like, go for it. But at the same time, what you kind of want to be aiming for, kind of tuning into their language, because the aim is for them to feel loved, you know, so that you can speak your partner's love language and they can speak yours, and then you get the give and take of it all, you know. And then I think it makes the relationship smoother. You're going to be keeping each other feeling loved and supported and wanted and all of these things, you know. It's going to be a smoother ride. But like I said, acts of service, like, I love that. I will show people that I love them by acts of service a lot of the time. Like, I love to try and make people's lives feel more relaxing, you know. I don't like the people that I love to feel stressed, obviously. So I quite often, without noticing, because this is not something I'm thinking about, it's just kind of, to me, like, I'm like, oh, I love them, I'm gonna do this, you know. I find myself, like, I love cooking people dinner. That's something I love to do, because I'm like, people are busy, people have so much to do, and I love cooking, so it's kind of like, it's not a burden. But like, I love, with my family and things, I'm like, if everyone's had a busy day at work and is stressed, and then it's like, fuck, now I have to walk the dog, cook dinner, like, do all that, and then by the time I can relax, I have to go to bed. Like, that's how it can feel. So I like to be like, okay, you finish work and dinner is made and I've walked the dog, and now you can just sit down and eat. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like that would feel like such a treat. It feels so luxurious, because you're like, I didn't need you to do that, I didn't ask you to do that, I was fully prepared to spend my evening doing all these fucking, like, chores or whatever. But, oh, Brooks cleaned my kitchen. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of thing I'll do. Like, little tasks. That's often what I do. But it is usually like, I'll clean or I'll cook. Look at me being so fucking domesticated. Wow, I didn't even realize. But I don't know. You know what I have just realized though? Is like, as much as I love doing things like that for people, and I would do it regardless of anyone noticing or like saying anything. Not noticing, but you know what I mean. I'm not like craving praise for it. At the same time, when someone notices and says like, you've made my day so much easier, thank you, like, I can appreciate what you're doing, that, I love that. Because like, that's not why I'm doing it, but also sometimes then after I spend all this time doing that, and then I feel like everyone's just like, oh yay, food, I'm like, tell me I did a great job. Do you know what I mean? So maybe words of affirmations is one for me. I didn't really think it was, because I feel like I'm thinking more in relationships. I'm not generally super insecure in the sense that I'm like, I need you to tell me that I'm the only person you love and things like that. I'm like, I don't really think you'd be with me if I wasn't. I don't know. It's not so much like that kind of reassurance that I would need, but it's more like appreciating me. Also, a good little self-love tip, a little tip for building a relationship with yourself, is you can use and practice your love languages on yourself. For example, if yours is quality time, spend quality time with yourself. Do you know what I mean? Just because you are thinking of a partner, when you're thinking about your love language, maybe you're thinking about what you'd want from a boyfriend, you can do that for yourself too. And honestly, you should be doing it for yourself, because as much as a partner can do these things for you and it feels great, they can't fill the void quite like you can fill your own void. Because generally, the things that you crave from a relationship, it's always best to kind of do your best of meeting those needs by yourself first. Obviously, there's some things that you can't do without a partner. You know, you can't meet some needs without a partner. But, you know, it's best to go into a relationship, in my opinion, without all your kind of tanks being empty, like just awaiting a partner to like do anything about. You know, you kind of want to go into it with like some movement already, you know, with like something in the fucking tank. Like, otherwise it's just like, God, like, you're giving your boyfriend like a job. He's like, fuck, like this bitch hasn't even started. If you love gifts, like buy yourself some flowers every now and then. I buy myself tulips all the time. Or like quality time. Take yourself out for lunch, or take yourself out on a walk, buy yourself a coffee, sit down, read a book, do things where it's not just sitting on your phone. Because as much as if someone did that on a date, you'd be like, hello. Oh my god, I'd be so mad if someone did that on a date. Imagine on a first date, someone's on their fucking phone. Like, what would you even do? I might get up and leave if someone did that. Like, I don't know. Anyway, as much as, you know, we're all gonna go on our phones and stuff, making intentional effort to be like, I'm not gonna touch my phone. I'm gonna like just be present with myself while I go on this walk or cook this dinner or whatever you want to do. That's important too, because you don't want to always be distracted when you're alone and then be really present when you're with people, because it's like, hello, you're ignoring yourself, you know? Honestly, practice them all on yourself. Like, do them all, because they all will make you feel loved. It's, you know, the point is, one will make you feel a whole lot more loved than the other four probably will. But anyway, God, do I know how to talk for a long time. I am gonna go. It's actually getting dark because I'm recording this after work, and normally I record these first thing on a Tuesday. Not that you would probably know that, but for me this feels really weird. Okay, it's really starting to rain right now, so I'm gonna go. I hope you enjoyed. I will talk to you next week. Have a great Valentine's Day. Love you lots. Bye.